It's 6:02 and I call this audio video special call board meeting to order. It's September 21st, 2020, 6:02. Dr. Salazar, can you help us with the pledge, please?
Yes, sir. Will everyone please rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Sandra? Present. Julian Trevino? Ruben, can you hear me?
I'm present. I'm present.
Okay, there you go. Mr. Castillo?
Present.
Mr. Ray Farias?
Present.
There you go. Mr. Jesus Amaya?
Present.
Ms. Leticia Quintero?
Present.
Thank you. And Dr. Gonzalo Salazar.
Present.
Okay, and item number 5, public comment, nobody signed up. So we move on to item 6, district presentations, achieving pandemic resilient teaching and learning spaces, and 2, CISD policy update 115, Dr. Salazar.
Mr. Garza, members of the board, we thank you for this opportunity to present information to you on our transition, regarding our transition plan. Our decisions over the past several months have been guided by two principles: delivering on our mission, providing a quality education for every child, and then delivering on the second principle is delivering on that mission in a safe environment. This evening, we want to share with you some information that we gathered as a result of a conversation we had with Dr. James Castillo. Dr. James Castillo is the health authority for Cameron County, and we used the conversation we had with him as a cornerstone for preparing our transition plan. Dr. Castillo did ask before we met that he referred us to a couple of studies that were coming out of Harvard University. He said he leans on those Harvard studies, and the recommendations coming out of those Harvard studies, which are more strict than even those of the CDC. He asked us to review those so that we could have conversations within the context of those studies. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ben Estrada. Mr. Ben Estrada reviewed those studies and put together the highlights, and he'll share that in 3 brief slides. Let me make you a host there, Mr. Estrada.
Do I have control, sir? There we go. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Good evening, board members, Dr. Salazar, and everyone connecting remotely. As Dr. Salazar mentioned, there were several studies conducted by the Global Health Institute of Harvard. There was a lot of information presented in those studies about how districts and schools could open safely during the pandemic. And the overall theme through all of the studies was the concept of pandemic resilient teaching and learning spaces. So it begs the question of what exactly is a pandemic resilient teaching and learning space? Essentially, it's a space that keeps learners, educators, and other staff members safe. And it is a trusted space. But in order to accomplish that particular concept of the pandemic resilient teaching and learning space, they recommend several protocols that need to be in place. So for students and staff, this means the following: effective cleaning and disinfection practices at the school and district level, hygiene practices. Of course, that means washing our hands, keeping our hands away from our eyes and our face, the concept of pandemic resilient bathrooms, physical and group distancing, which of course we're all very familiar with, the use of face coverings, and contact tracing procedures. Harvard felt that if all of these protocols could be implemented, then schools and districts can achieve that resilient teaching and learning space that will get them one step closer to opening up and providing face-to-face instruction to our students. Next slide, please. In those studies, they also created kind of a coding system to aid educators and the decision makers in guiding them of when is the best time to open up our schools for students. So the color coding is pretty common. I think we're all familiar with the colors. So when we start at the green level, which of course the best level where you want to be, at that point, the area would be reporting less than one new daily reported case per 100,000 people in the area, okay? So at that, when you take that number, we have to look at our county numbers to make that adjustment to determine what exactly is our number. So you can see down at the bottom of the slide, the population for Cameron County is 423,163 residents. So we can take these numbers and multiply them by 4. So for Cameron County, if we are reporting less than 4 cases of COVID-19 daily, then we're pretty much on track for containment and conditional that we're continuing the use of viral testing and contact tracing surveillance to make sure that we contain any spikes in or outbreaks of COVID-19. Now, if those cases do elevate, then we move into the yellow category. And again, looking at those numbers for reporting 1 to 10 overall of daily new cases per 100,000, we apply the numbers for Cameron County, we adjust those. We're reporting 4 to 40 cases daily. At that point, strategic choices must be made about which package of non-pharmaceutical interventions we're going to use for control. Essentially, what they're saying is, okay, you're at yellow, you need to start stepping up your game in terms of implementing those protocols and making sure those protocols are being followed. Because if not, we end up in the next stage, which is orange. At the original 10 to 25, adjusting for Cameron County, when we report 40 to 100 daily new cases, at that time, again, strategic choices must be made about which package of non-pharmaceutical interventions we're going to use to control the spread of COVID. Now, stay-at-home orders are advised unless we can maintain the viral testing and contact tracing capacity at an implementable levels so that we can control that surge of cases. And of course, finally, when we reach the red category, we're basically reporting more than 100 cases per day. And at that point, stay-at-home orders are necessary. So aside taking the red out of the chart, we can continue to operate in the orange, the yellow, and the green, but we must make sure that we implement the protocols that we put in place to help control the spread of COVID. So what do our numbers look like? Next slide, please. This particular chart came from the Texas Health and Human Services website, and it basically tracks the number of cases from March all the way to the present. So when we look at our numbers for last week, starting on Tuesday, September 15th, we were reporting 169 new cases on that day. On the 16th, we reported 70 cases. 17th, 54 cases. The 18th, 63, and then finally on the 19th, 66. So you can see that downward trend going of positive cases in Cameron County. With those numbers, that puts us in the solid orange category, okay? So if we can maintain that number going down, and we can get our numbers to consistently start going down into those numbers, then we're gonna be on real good track, and we're gonna be a real good pace that we'll be able to open up and offer face-to-face instruction in our district.
Thank you, Mr. Estrada. Several months ago, we made a decision to delay the start of the school year. And we did that in an effort to allow the mitigation measures in Cameron County at the state level to take effect. Today, we begin the third week of school. The first 2 weeks of school will give teachers the option to teach from home or to come into the classroom. Today was the first day the teachers were required to teach from the classroom. During the first 2 weeks of school, we were required to open our doors to children who had no access to internet. There were kids in our school district living in colonias that no matter what you do, there is no access to the internet there, and we cannot allow students to fall behind. So those students have been working out of computer labs in our classroom, computer labs on our campuses alongside the children of teachers. Allowing the children of teachers to come into the computer labs to access online instruction actually was helpful in allowing teachers to come and teach. So today we see that cases in Cameron County are moving in the right direction. We are very optimistic, having been through the 2 weeks after Labor Day, and the numbers continue to move in the right direction. We know that people made good decisions on Labor Day weekend. We had a downpour, and that may have helped with those decisions, but we're optimistic about where the numbers are, that we're moving in the right direction, and that we can actually implement our transition plan in a way that minimizes risk for everyone. So one of the questions that comes up often when we have this conversation is, what will the district do if we have a positive case? And before we move on with the next portion of the presentation, we feel it's important that we address that question one more time, since it is the most frequent question that is asked when we cover this material. So I'm going to ask Mr. McDonough to speak to that.
Thank you, Dr. Salazar, members of the board. This is probably the most frequently asked question that we have. And basically what we've come up with is the protocol that we're following is a protocol that's guided by TEA guidelines, and we also took into account our local health authorities' recommendations that we've received. And the key thing that we are doing is, if we do have a student that is a test confirmed COVID-19 student, or if we have a student that is experiencing symptoms. If we have a student that is experiencing symptoms, we presume that that student is positive at that point. And then basically what we're doing is we're going to follow a 4-pronged criteria, which is highlighted on the screen in front of you. And the key points, they must meet all 4 of these criteria points. The first one is that at least 1 day or 24 hours has passed since recovery, resolution of fever without fever-reducing medication. Second point is the individual has improvement in symptoms, for example, whether it's cough, shortness of breath, those key symptoms associated with COVID-19. And then at least 14 calendar days have passed since symptoms first occurred. And then the final point is a note from a physician clearing them for return to school. So these 4 points, this 4-point criteria must occur before a positive student would be able to return to campus. Yeah.
Okay, it is important to note that the information that Mr. McDonough just shared is but a small portion of the information on safety protocols that we have posted on our district website. The information can be found at Start Safe to Finish Strong portion of our homepage, where you will find detailed information on how we will welcome students to the classroom, what measures are in place on every campus throughout the district, including this four-pronged decision-making approach. So why do we have a transition plan to face-to-face instruction? This evening, we have an item on the agenda that asks the board to authorize administration to file a waiver for 4 additional weeks of remote instruction. TEA has indicated that there is a requirement that we have a transition plan to face-to-face instruction when filing this waiver. And so we're going to pause here before we share the next PowerPoint, the next slide presentation that lays out the plan for our transition plan in the district. But so we'll pause here to see if anyone has any questions.
Can you all hear me? Okay. At any point here in the presentation, are we going to discuss the contact tracing procedure? If so, I'll hold my question.
Okay, so we don't have a slide on contact tracing procedure, but I did invite Nurse Davis to join us because in anticipation of some of these questions. So you want to go ahead and ask your question, Mr. Trevino? Are you asking us to describe our contact tracing?
What is the procedure?
Nurse Davis, would you unmute?
Good evening. I'd be happy to answer the question for you. Mrs. Anaya and I are working together. She's doing the contact tracing for the staff, and I'm doing the contact tracing for the students, and we're still working together if either one of us has a question. So if a student comes to school and they become ill at school, and it's decided that they need to go home, and then they come back to with a positive COVID test, then what we would do is we're going to have seating charts for each classroom, and we'll be able to look to see where that student is sitting and to see where the 6 feet limit is around that student. And we would notify those students closest to him to let them know that they have been in a classroom that has a student that has, they've been exposed because they might have been a little bit closer. We're also going to have another letter that will be sent out notifying people that there is a case on campus, and have contact information for more questions and answers for the people to call. So we would contact each person first in the student's family. We want to see if anyone else is sick. Has anyone else been diagnosed? What the situation is there. Then we will go into the school to see which kids were closest together, ask them how they feel, keep an eye on them, give them the opportunity to, if they would like to go get a test done for the COVID bug. Excuse me, my brain is not working so good right now. Right. And also, if the student is riding the school bus, we would also do the same thing for the school bus, because that's another place that the kids are kept separated by 6 feet and they all have a mask on, but we still need to keep track of all of that. And then for the staff, if a staff person becomes ill and they're at school and they go home sick, we would do the same thing for the staff, with Mrs. Anaya heading up on that one, seeing where their daily plan was, who they were around, did they ever go anywhere closer. And close contact, according to CDC and also the TEA, is that whether or not you have a mask on, and if you're closer than 6 feet for longer than 15 minutes. So we have those guidelines that we're using to determine that.
So there's also some reporting requirements. Did you touch on that? I turned my attention to this
sure.
in the next presentation, but.
Yes, The TEA, we have a form that we need to send into them if they're every Monday, if anyone on the campus has been ill or has been diagnosed actually with the COVID. And then Cameron County Health Department has gifted us with some new forms, and we will be doing a report on those. They're a little bit more involved. They want to know, we can send the forms out if you'd like to look at them, but basically it's who has been exposed, who has been diagnosed, the contact persons around them, family members, if what else, the doctor, what their symptoms were. And there's another form that they have of who has been closest to that student. And that's where the seating assignments are really going to come in handy. And the PEMS department is going to be in charge of doing most of the information needed for Cameron County. They also have a Survey Monkey for us to fill out that has 9 specific questions based on what school is submitting the report, what district you belong to, how many students are online, how many students are offline, how many students are on in the campus. And so they're trying to keep track of how many students and where they are and if any of them get sick.
And the questionnaires are for students and staff, right?
Yes, you're exactly correct.
Daily attendance reports for students and staff.
Mm-hmm.
So the only other question I have, so you mentioned that we'll offer them an option to get tested. And so do we have testing available? What is the price and the procedure for that?
I say offer, they don't have to get tested, but if they want to get tested, we have different facilities that we can suggest. Like today, we suggested Sioux Clinica, the UT Mobile Health Clinic, and there's some other places. Cameron County has testing units that we can use also. Some of the doctor's offices are doing that. If they need help, I have some people that I can call for care coordination to help us with paying for them if that would come down to it, if it's something that they have to do and they can't afford.
But outside of a hardship where we can reach organizations within the community to help, the district is not paying.
No.
We're not conducting any testing. That's not our role.
Right.
My concern was that we should have, even though that's not our role, we should be communicating with community and working with them to ensure that that student is going to get tested.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we go on? Mrs. Garcia?
I think the 4th point said they needed clearance from a doctor to return. Is that the same as getting a negative test result? I mean, is that what happens when a doctor finally clears?
Yes, ma'am. There was actually a point about a month ago where we were asking for both a negative and a note from the doctor saying you've been cleared. But doctors' offices are so busy that some of them are saying you already have a negative test. We're not going to see you again, just to give you a note that satisfies the school district. So a negative test will suffice.
Thank you.
Mr. Amaya has a question.
I don't know if the wording has changed on this, but at one point it said or alternative diagnosis. That was the purpose of the doctor's note.
Yes, sir. The alternative diagnosis would say that the symptoms were due to strep or other illnesses that are not COVID, and so yeah, that would suffice also as a reason, evidence that the student could return to campus.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yes, just to clarify, that is the one point in the protocol that I went through with the 4-point. That is the one time where you would not have to follow, you wouldn't have to go through, for example, the 14-day period of waiting because you had an alternate diagnosis. So if a student was sent home with coughing or some type of symptom, and then they receive an alternate diagnosis, for example, student had strep, they could return prior to completing those other points. That's the one point where you would be able to bypass all of those other points.
Can you see that screen yet? Okay, do this here, there. Shagasa, members of the board, at this time we can continue. Coach, if it's okay. We'll continue with our plan for achieving pandemic resilient teaching and learning spaces. Again, this is a requirement for filing the TEA waiver for 4 additional weeks of remote instruction. Got a couple of slides here that remind us that we started instruction. We began the school year on September 8th, and the first 4 weeks of remote learning end on October 2nd. The second 4 weeks would begin on October 5th, and Fresnos CISD will move into a transitional phase-in plan. The intentional design of this transition plan ensures that campuses maintain pandemic resilient spaces as we move to scale. Just to review some of the options available to households in our district, students who opted for on-campus face-to-face instruction or hybrid instruction will return to school at some point during the next 4 weeks. In pre-kinder to second grade, we agreed that these are the age where we're setting the foundation for their elementary years, and we agreed that administration believes that we should have these kids on campus full-time every day, if possible, if we could create spaces where we can exercise social distancing. Third to 8th grade, we felt that we could have kids on campus if we had a hybrid model. And when we surveyed parents, there was interest in participating in a hybrid model where students are on campus one day and learning from home the next. The hybrid model allows us to reduce our enrollment in half and create spaces, particularly at our middle schools and high schools, where our campuses are operating near capacity, and so a hybrid schedule allows us to create space for social distancing to occur. In 9th through 12th grade, students have the option to participate in either hybrid or remote instruction. Those are the 2 options available to high school students. With an enrollment of 1,700 students, we need the hybrid schedule in order to exercise social distancing. So parents have the option for their children to remain in remote learning throughout the 2021 school year if they so choose. So our transition plan will begin on October 5th. Students who participate in our adaptive learning behavior or adaptive learning or behavior units may return to campus on October 5th. And the other thing that happens on October 5th is that students in grades 7th through 12th participating in fine arts or athletics may begin meeting before and after school, but must abide by UIL guidelines. So going back to our students in the units, half of our parents, the most fragile population we serve, are telling us our kids are regressing, we need to have them in school. Others are saying my child is too fragile and there's no way I would send them to school. But by opening this option up, and on October 5th, parents have choices. Before I move on to the next week, does anyone have any questions about what will occur on October 5th? Okay, hearing none, we move to October 12th. October 12th, students who opted for hybrid instruction in grades 6th, 9th, and 11th grade will return to campus on a maroon and gold schedule. These are underclassmen, students in campus. So we feel that having an opportunity with the underclassmen, giving ourselves a week with them allows us to give them an orientation to the campus, go review our procedures with them. And I think kids would welcome the opportunity of learning our protocols without the upperclassmen being on those campuses. The other group that is on campus for the first time is pre-kinder. Pre-kinder and some of our kinder students who did not attend pre-K the year before will be able to return to full-time on-campus instruction on October 12th. So a lot of what we do in pre-K and even in kinder is prepare school kids for school readiness. And we do so in developmentally appropriate practices. So bringing these kids in first also allows us to provide an orientation period for them before all of the other students come on campus. It also allows parents who are bringing, a lot of times it's young couples bringing kids to school for the first time. It gives them the opportunity to walk kids to class, take that picture of the first day that they walk them to class, give them that moment. And we'll allow that for the first couple of days. And on the third day, we're going to begin to limit the number of visitors that we have on campus and just welcome pre-kinder and kinder students at the door. Before I move to October 16th, I'm sorry. I'll pause here to see if anyone has questions about the transition on October 12th. If not, we move on to October 19th. On October 19th, students in grade 1st and 2nd will return to full-time on-campus instruction. Remember, pre-K to 2nd grade come to school every day on a full day. And then students in 3rd and 7th grade will return to campus on a hybrid maroon schedule. So we're adding 1st and 2nd and 3rd, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd at the elementary level, 7th grade at the middle school level, and then students in 3rd through 8th grade who opted for full-time on-campus instruction may return. Again, there may be parents who want to send their kids to school every day. And if they are 3rd graders through 8th graders, those students may return to campus on October the 19th. The last time we checked with parents, we had about 15% of all households that were interested in sending their children to school every day.
What was that percentage?
15. I suspect it's a little higher now that that we've had remote instruction in place. Again, part of the reason for needing a transition plan is that not all kids thrive in a remote environment, and some parents have realized that that's not their child's learning style, that they may do better at school. So this week, our teachers will be calling to get a better handle on whether people should change their minds one way or the other. And that I think it's important to collect that data as we make decisions for how many meals we prepare or how we will operate our transportation services. Finally, we move to October 26th, where we have students in 4th, 5th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. In other words, the upperclassmen on each of these campuses at each of these levels, upperclassmen return to campus on a hybrid maroon and gold schedule. Should the county health data, this is something that the state wants to know on our waiver. If things dramatically improve in your county, are you willing to accelerate this transition plan? And of course, the answer is yes. We feel students learn best when they're in front of their teacher, and we would be willing. At the same time, we're going to monitor cases, positive cases in Cameron County, and make decisions as appropriate. And then the last bullet is just a reminder that the Harvard Global Health Institute recommendations were consulted in considering the creation of this transition plan. Does anyone have any questions on the material we just covered? Yes. Go ahead. Mrs. Garcia, go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to clarify. This is the plan if our waiver gets accepted?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I make a suggestion? Just
yes,
whenever, and it's not the plan. It's when you're speaking, everybody else needs to be muted so that we don't get like background. So I don't know if Mr. Garza could like temporarily mute himself, like when we have you presenting, because you're so close to him that we get feedback.
I'm so
Or I got
sorry.
feedback. I don't know if everybody gets feedback or not.
That's on me. The other thing I could have done was mute all. And so I apologize.
It wasn't too bad. We could hear you. It was just a little feedback.
Okay. So at this point, everyone is muted and you will have to press the space bar in order to speak. And I know that makes it much better. Thank you for pointing that out, Mrs. Garcia. Press the space bar. Yeah, go ahead and ask. Go ahead, Mr. Castillo.
Question. After the 26th of October, I guess it depends on what the situation is, how it's progressing. That's do we need to go another 4 weeks or?
So the state is not providing an additional 4 weeks. It's a one-time 4-week extension. Of course, parents have the option of changing their mind. We do have the authorization from TA to ask parents to keep their children in whatever mode of instruction they chose, to keep them there until the next marking period, at which time parents can change their mind, but then they have to stay in that, they should stay in that setting till the next marking period. We're also prepared to be flexible with that because some circumstances change in households. People are called back to work, things like that. And so we will take that into consideration when working with parents.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Coach, this concludes our presentation unless there are any other questions or suggestions. Okay, let me mute you, Coach.
Move on to item 2. Asb Policy update 415.
There. You're open. Mic's open.
Let's move on to item 2, TASB Policy Update 115. Dr. Salazar.
Okay, this is the model. Is it not showing? Hold on just a second. Open up the file. Wait a minute, I'll have this slide up in a minute. Did you, okay. Is it showing now?
Thank you. Can y'all hear me? Hear me? So
Mr. Garza, members of the board, Dr. Salazar, this evening I will be presenting School Board Policy Update 115. Update 115 focuses on some federal regulations or some policies that have been reorganized. So we'll start off with the first policy that's been, I would need Dr. Salazar to. There you go. Thank you, sir. So the first three policies that are that there are some changes to is FB, DIA, and FFH. And these, there's a new regulation, a new federal Title IX regulation that is effective August 14 of 2020. This is from the Department of Education. So the three policies have been revised, and I will cover each one individually. The first one is FB, if we could proceed. The FB has to do with equal educational opportunity. The only changes there is stating that the district, let me put on my glasses, the district designates and authorizes the Title IX coordinator. And also there's a wording change on the ADA Section 504 coordinator, also stating that the district designates the authority to the ADA and the Section 504 coordinator. So that was just simple language on that local policy FB. The next one is DIA. DIA is a policy that deals with employee welfare. It's a freedom from discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. And this incorporates a recent U.S. Supreme Court decision which dealt with adverse employment against an employee on the basis of homosexuality and transgender, which violates Title VII prohibition on sex discrimination in employment. So on this policy, it clarifies that discrimination on the basis of sex includes discrimination on the basis of biological sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, gender stereotypes, or any other prohibited basis related to sex. So I'm going to go a little further on DIA and some of the revisions. Again, DIA deals with the employees, any discrimination, harassment, and retaliation cases. We always refer or use DIA as a guide. Some of the revisions that were included here, the definition of defined by Title IX is a definition of prohibited conduct. We were so very used to the definition of being unwelcome conduct that a reasonable person would consider severe, pervasive, and persistent. Those were the three words that most of our administrators would use. It's a severe, it's a pervasive, and it's persistent. It's changed to now it's severe, pervasive, and objectively offensive, such that it effectively denied a student or an employee equal access. That's what it's changed. We also have, there's a three-part definition that the employee conditioning an aid, a benefit, or a service of the school on the student's participation in sexual conduct. So it's something for something. And 3, sexual assault, dating violence, domestic violence, or stalking. That was the 3-part definition that is now included here. Can we go back, Dr. Salazar? It also just added to the DIA the process, the formal complaint process, which I will review in just a bit, and also designated the preponderance of evidence to determine the responsibility. So we must look at, do we have enough evidence, the preponderance of evidence, to make a decision? So when DIA focuses on employees, FFH focuses on student discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. This also addresses the new Title IX regulations, very similar to our DIA, some of the similar languages, and the only difference is that FFH is for student. If I could take a few minutes, I would like to go over the grievance process in the Title IX because now it's very detailed. The federal government has given us a process of how to conduct an investigation. Before, it used to be the Title IX coordinator. The Title IX coordinator will do the investigation, make a decision, and provide the decision over to the parents. Now there's some roles. There are 5 roles in our school district, and every role has to be taken by a different person, starting off with the Title IX coordinator. So in this case, at this district, I have been designated as the Title IX coordinator. So if a parent comes into a campus or an employee comes into a campus or a supervisor and claims harassment or sexual harassment, the person, the supervisor, the principal at the campus will receive the complaint. They have to take an intake of that complaint. They in turn have 24 hours to provide that complaint to me, the Title IX coordinator. I have the obligation of contacting both the complainant and the respondent. The complainant is the person the victim, and the respondent is the perpetrator. I have to provide immediately contact both parties and let them know that there is a complaint or there is a concern. I also have to provide supportive measures to both parties. We cannot say, well, you did this, you're the respondent, you're the perpetrator, you're being accused of this, so I'm going to provide this discipline. I cannot do that. I need to conduct an investigation and not make a determination until the full investigation has been conducted. So what I do is I make contact with both parties. I let them know that there is a complaint and that we will follow the process. I then have to take that complaint and assign an investigator, somebody separate from the Title IX coordinator. The investigator will now, at the same time, reach out to both parties and let them know that this person will be conducting an investigation. As they're conducting the investigation, it's important to know that they must provide 3 to 5 days notice to let them know that I will be interviewing the respondent and the complainant at separate times, at which time that complainant or that respondent, either party, can bring in an advisor. So when the investigator is conducting the investigation with the student, the advisor or the parent may be present at that time of that investigation. However, the advisor cannot ask any questions or cannot participate. They're only silent participants. They can be in the room, but they cannot ask. So once you do the complainant, now you have witnesses that they brought forth. At that point, the advisor is not allowed to be in that investigation. Then we follow over to the complainant, having the same opportunity. They also may have an advisor, and we proceed to the same process. Once the investigator has completed that investigation or things that, okay, I think I can write a report, they will submit the report to both parties, giving them 10 days to read the report and provide any feedback or any questions that they might have. So if they have any questions, then they have 10 days to provide. The investigator will look at those questions or the feedback that was provided and see if there is a need to do further investigation. When it's concluded, now it's a long process. Now the investigator writes a full report, a final report, gives it to both parties and gives it to the decision maker. This is another person who will now make the decision based on the report that the investigator brought forth. There's also a facilitator in case that both parties want to agree to work it out. There's a facilitator that can work with both of them. What's important as well is that as a district, we must provide supportive measures to both parties, being counseling, change of schedules. What we need to support both parties, we must provide that. The only other thing is that I can add to that is that what I've talked to our administration and our administrators is ensuring that we follow the process, that every process or that everyone involved is following the process and giving the ample time notice to our both parties. Because if they want to appeal the decision, if any party wants to appeal the decision, the only allowable basis for appealing that decision, if there was irregularity in procedure, that's one. If new evidence was brought forth that was not taken into account during the investigation, and if there's a conflict of interest between the Title IX coordinator, the investigator, or the decision maker. If there's a conflict of interest, that any of those three, there would be a basis, there'll be grounds for basis of appeal. Otherwise, if we follow, then we should be okay, ensuring that we're doing all our process. So that is the new regulation that the Department of Education and the federal government has brought forth over for Title IX harassment, sexual harassment.
So let me pause here because that's a workshop in and of itself. It's a very cumbersome process that is handed down, not by the state, but by the feds. And it puts administrators in different roles, and the requirements are completely different than what a parent bringing a concern has historically expected out of us. First thing they will ask is that the aggressor, the child, be removed out of the same classroom. And we can't. We're not going to be able to do that. And we're going to have to stay put until a period of decision is made, unless there's a clear and present danger of safety. And that's described a little differently, Mrs. Amato, right? There is an
on an emergency basis.
On an emergency basis. Coach.
You had stated that you had stated that they need to contact you within 24 hours. That's correct.
I stated that when the complaint comes into a principal or an administrator or to a supervisor, they have 24 hours to report it to the Title IX coordinator. So they have 24 hours to take.
Is that 24 hours from the time of the incident, or the time it was reported, or the time
that it was reported? From the time they come forth and report it to the administrator, they have 24 hours to report it to me.
Okay. But if the timeline is, they don't meet that timeline, is it open-ended as far as a sexual harassment complaint? Is that still?
I'm sorry. We do have to make every effort that when there is a complaint, that we do follow the procedure. I know
however long the length of the time of as far as the sexual harassment, because you had also stated that if they don't fall under the guidelines or the procedure, the process that you have, then you go into a different thing, evaluation of it, or as far as
So from the time of the incident, there is no timeline, and when they report it to me, it's when they receive the complaint.
Okay.
That's when they have to act immediate.
Thank you for clearing that up.
No problem, sir.
For me, that is. Okay. Sure. I don't have everybody's pictures here, so I can't tell if they're raising their hand.
Let's see if we can fix that. So this tile over here, or we can ask them to speak up. Does anyone have any questions? And they can just open their mic and ask.
I have a question.
Mr. Trevino, go ahead.
Hi, Ms. Amaro. So you mentioned the everyone has individual parts, and then you said there's a section in there in regarding a conflict of interest. So will the investigator, will the decision maker, are all of those school personnel?
Yes, sir. All of the roles have been filled by school personnel. We had to attend a training. All 5 of us had to attend a training. The PowerPoint on the slides of the training that we attended is on our website already under Title IX. And I think asking the question, ensuring that when we do that intake, especially as a Title IX coordinator, as my role, is communicating with the parent or whoever brings that complaint on the process.
So just to follow up, so then the decision maker is going to make the decision and then present that decision to you, and then you communicate that to the parties.
No,
How does that work?
The decision maker takes the information from the investigator and then makes a written decision, which in turn is presented over to the parties.
So then you're not involved in any other point as
I think one of my roles too as a Title IX coordinator is to ensure that the process is being followed and also to assist the members as needed.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay, without any more questions, we continue then with our presentation on Asb Update 115. Mrs. Amano.
Okay, so we move on to policy FB local. Hold on, I'm sorry. To the next slide, sir, please. BF local. This has to do with board policies, and the only revision on this policy was reinforcing that any legal policies are not to be adopted by the board. They only serve as a reference material to provide information on any existing law. So it's just a line that was added to BF local. Our next policy is DED local. This deals with compensation and benefits, vacations and holidays. It addresses the board's authorization to grant vacation benefits, holiday benefits, or both to any eligible employee. It's recommended, we do have in our policy, it's very detailed. It is recommended that any details be removed from policy and added to administrative procedures. So working with Mrs. Anaya, we will like to delete the procedures and add it to our staff handbook. Our next policy is DMD local. It is recommended for deletion. This is on professional development, on meetings and visitations. This is only PD. It's recommended for deletion because it says that the board does not need to address attendance of professional meetings, any guidance or any guidance on professional meetings for our staff need to be added to our administrative procedures as well. So it's asking that we delete this policy. Our next policy is EIA local academic achievement. This is permitting our school district to award students with partial credit when a student moves from one campus or makes a transition from one district to another. Is saying that we could provide partial credit for a course that they take. If they move within half a semester or within the semester, that they receive partial credit. It also requires the student to retake this policy also is requiring the student to retake the portion of the course with a failing grade has been deleted. It's providing administrators some flexibility in selecting what's the best appropriate way to get earn some of that credit. And it also deleted some provisions on transition assistance on homeless and migrant students. It did not delete it from policy entirely. It moved it from EIA to policy FD. And this mostly deals with students who transition from one district to the other, or who become homeless, or some of our migrant students who are coming in after they go work. This is FD. This is where the comment from EI was moved over regarding the transition assistance services on students who are enrolling and transferring to our district or enrolling in our district. FEB local, this deals with attendance accounting. It's deleting the attendance taking time. It was designated as the second or fifth instructional hour. and it's giving the superintendent the responsibility to designate the attendance taking period. And we must add it to administrative procedures. What we've done is our student handbooks do state that our attendance taking period is their second instructional period. And that's what has been designated there. FFG, this deals with student welfare, child abuse, and neglect. It only aligns it to administrative code. There's a lot of verbiage, a lot of words on text addressing sexual abuse, trafficking, and maltreatment of children. It also included, there used to be an FFG exhibit, which outlined reporting procedures. They've taken the exhibit and they've included it in our local policy. So they combined the exhibit and local into just one document. So that's FFG. The next one is FMF. This policy is recommended for deletion. There's no legal requirement for board adopted policy on student contests and competitions. So it's saying take this policy and add it to your student handbooks or any administrative or extracurricular handbooks. So we're moving that. FNG deals with parent complaints and GF deals with public complaints. And what it's on this division in both policies is saying that if an individual has been ejected or removed from any district property, they're entitled to come to the board within 90 calendar days. It used to say business days. Now it says calendar days. Of course, it is also always recommended that it be resolved at the administrative level. And I think those are all our policies under update 115. Are there any questions?
Questions from anyone? Okay, then we're going to move on to item 7, action item. Discuss and take action to authorize administration to submit a waiver for an additional 4 weeks of remote instruction. At this time, I will entertain a motion. Mr. Trevino.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that the board authorize administration to submit a waiver for an additional 4 weeks of remote instruction.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Castillo.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to take action to authorize administration to submit a waiver. Discussion. No discussion. There's a vote. It's either yes or no. Ms. Sandra Garcia.
Yes.
Mr. Rubén Trevino.
Yes.
Mr. Martin Castillo.
Yes.
Mr. Ray Farias.
We may have lost him.
Mr. Jesus Amaya.
Yes.
Mr. Jose Quintero.
Yes.
And Leonel Garza vote yes. The motion without Mr. Farias is 6-0. Motion passes 6-0 with Mr. Farias having technical difficulties as far as his vote. Okay. We now move on to announcements. Dr. Salazar.
Mr. Garza, members of the board, the only announcement we have this evening is that on Monday, October 12th, we'll hold our regular school board meeting at 6 p.m. Those are all the announcements we have.
Thank you, sir. It is 7:06. And thank you all for coming on. We'll adjourn this meeting.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.